Okay, good evening, colleagues. We'll make a start. I think the clock wears a minute or two slow, so we have gone 7 o'clock. Before we begin, can I just remind you that the meeting has been webcasted this evening. It will be shown live, should anybody be interested in watching it, and it will of course be stored for later viewing. Can I just remind councillors when they are speaking to switch on their microphones and to switch them off when they've finished. Similarly with officers, if they are contributing or asked to contribute, can you switch on your microphone and switch it off after you've finished speaking? Okay. Item 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Thanks, Provost. We have apologies this evening from Deputy Provost Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr Daly. Item number 2, any declarations of interest. Can I remind you that the Councillors' Code of Conduct requires all elected members to declare any financial or non-financial interests they may have on any items on tonight's agenda. Are there any declarations? Councillor Grant.
It's a non-financial interest in the Leisure Trust.
Okay, thank you. We note that. Any other? Councillor Devlin? Councillor O'Kane?
Similarly, a non-financial interest in the Leisure Trust.
Sorry, Councillor Merrick?
Also non-financial interest in the Leisure Trust.
Thank you.
Provost, can I just clarify through you, which item is it, Councillor Grant, that you're expressing an interest in as far as your declaration is concerned?
Sorry, I just thought that in the minute there might be some reference to the Leisure Trust in the minutes, so I just thought I'd better say something.
Provost, through you, just for clarification, if it's an item that's referred to in a minute, there's no need for you to make a declaration.
Okay, Mr Daly, thank you for that clarification. Can we move on then to item number 3, which is the minute of our budget meeting of the 2nd of March 2018. The minute is submitted for approval and for signature this evening. Councillor Grant, do you wish to ask a question?
Thank you, Provost. Could I refer the meeting to page 298? At the top of that page, it was something that I mentioned, and I appreciate that a minute is not a verbatim piece of information, but I would like a little bit added on to the sentence, please, where it's talking about the floor's arrangement. Arrangement was to operate on a temporary basis, and I would like added on to that, and it is now 20 years since it started. So I think the point is that the 20 years means it's not a temporary arrangement. So if everybody's agreed, could we please add that in?
I have no difficulties. Are you comfortable with that? I think for strict accuracy, I think you and I are one of the longest serving councillors. I think it's technically 22 years, I think, rather than 20 years, so we might as well be accurate if we're going to add that sentence, but I don't think anybody's got any objection to it, so we'll add that to the minute. Councillor Aiken.
Thank you, Provost. Just another thing to draw your attention to. If you turn to page 300 of the minutes, and just to locate the paragraph midway down, it begins with the words, in response to the comments about the proposal to build a new Eastwood Leisure Centre, Councillor Merrick emphasised the project was subject to consultation, etc., etc. Just to say that immediately before Councillor Merrick said that, he also said an additional sentence. He said that the Leisure Trust is not competing against the private sector. Councillor Merrick, he clearly said this at 1 hour 27 minutes 54 seconds into the webcast, and it was clearly audible. This wasn't an aside comment. It was a direct response to Councillor Wallace's comment that the Leisure Trust was in competition with the private sector. So I just think it should be minuted, that comment, because I think it's an important comment to be minuted.
As Mr Daly's already explained, I mean, the minutes are not meant to be a verbatim report of the meeting. But is that a formal amendment you're making, Councillor Aiken? to the minute?
Well, that was what was said at the meeting. So and I think it's a substantive point that it should be reflected in the minutes.
Okay, but are you making a formal amendment to have the minute changed?
Yes, please.
Okay, do you have a seconder for that? Okay, Councillor. To Councillor Merrick, if he wishes to comment on the accuracy of the minute as the relevant convener.
Well, I will just give a brief comment, if that's okay, Provost. Thank you. Interesting that Councillor MacDonald seconded it when he wasn't even at the last meeting, however. Maybe he heard it on the thing. Okay, so what I said was that the Trust does not compete with the private sector, but as an organisation, the Trust does not compete with the private sector. This is a subjective point, and recently with the Barclay Review, the conversations that the whole sport and leisure organisations across the country were having with the government, they are being treated differently. They're not being treated like private operators. That's the point. I can go on a little bit more, but I don't really want to waste our time haggling over a couple of words here and there. I don't think it's substantive.
Okay.
I'm quite happy to speak with Councillor Wallace and Councillor Swift and Councillor Miller ad nauseum afterwards, but
okay. Well, I don't think there's any real debate about what was said at the meeting. It's simply whether it's detailed enough to be recorded in the minute, bearing in mind that the minutes can never be a verbatim report of a meeting which has gone on for sometimes 2-3 hours. So, are we comfortable with the minute and we accept it the way it is?
I'm comfortable with it the way it is.
We need to get somebody to move the minute as it stands as a correct record and seconded and then take as a vote again.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to get a sense of the meeting. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Provost. I don't think it's an unreasonable request, given that it's quite clearly said. I mean, we've got it in the webcast. Is there any harm in actually having it down in black and white somewhere? Just for the record, thank you.
Up to yourself. Councillor Merrick, are you comfortable with it?
I have no qualms about it being there or not. I think I've given a little bit more explanation of Florida.
Okay, well, I think it seems to be a relatively small point and there's no point in falling out, so we'll happily include that if that keeps everybody on board. Thank you. Any other issues on the minute of the meeting of the 6th of March? Sorry, of the 2nd of March. Councillor O'Kane.
Thank you. Page 296, fourth paragraph, in terms of Councillor Miller's contribution, not an issue of accuracy, because I don't doubt that that's what he said, but just perhaps an issue of clarity from my point of view, because he did refer to me in terms of the Conservative previous amendment to the budget around turning down the temperature in schools. Councillor Miller said that that's what we were doing as an administration. Just to confirm that that is not the case, we're not turning down the temperature throughout the school academic year, as had been proposed previously by the Conservatives, but rather new technology has been brought in to minimise the use of various water and energy usage, but also that we will use our schools less in holiday periods. Therefore, that will generate a saving, but also to look at how we zone schools. So when certain parts of the building aren't being used, we're not using heating and lighting. So just for clarity. Thank you, Provost.
Okay, I know your point for clarity that heating has not been turned down in schools, but I'm not sure if there's a specific need to amend the minute. Okay. Okay, so it's a point of clarification, so we'll know what you said, Councillor O'Kane, and move on, okay? Can I move on to item number 4, which is the minute of the meeting, the various meetings from 3rd of March to 27th of March. These minutes are submitted for approval, but again, I'm happy to take any questions on the minutes that any of the councillors may have. Councillor Miller.
Thank you very much, Provost. At the Cabinet meeting, in the Cabinet papers, that can I refer back to even the council meeting prior to that? Councillor Bamford was heard to say that at the council meeting, the roads were, according to the roads indicator, roads were at 2nd for A roads and 16th overall. At the Cabinet papers, and I've actually got it here just for ease of reference, it's on page 102. We're actually it's 22nd overall. Now, it's not for me to say that Lady has been deliberately economical with the truth, but according to the Cabinet papers, we're 16th for B roads. You were sure right enough in that. But you said 16th overall, but we're actually 22nd overall. Could we have some clarity as to who is right and who is wrong?
I don't know if Mr. Do you want to answer that, Councillor
I'm happy
Bamford?
to accept it. I said overall by mistake it was second for the trunk roads and 16th for
B
roads.
And 22nd.
I wasn't aware of the 22nd, but yeah, I was incorrect.
Thank you.
Happy to amend that minute then, okay? No, just a clarification, okay. Any other points in the minute diet? All happy with it? Okay, can we approve that and move on to item number 5? These are items which are remitted to full council. The first one is the General Fund Capital Programme for 2017-18, and effectively it's the amendment to the capital programme which is being referred from Cabinet to the full council. Any comments or questions that councillors may have? And moving on to number 2, which is the Housing Capital Programme for 2017-18. Again, it's the amendments to the Housing Capital Programme which are remitted to full council for approval. Again, happy to take any questions or comments that councillors may have. Housing conveners keen to move on, so we'll accept that. Right, thank you. Moving on then to item number 4, which, sorry, I beg your pardon, I'm looking at page 4, it's item number 6, a notice of motion. And it's a notice of motion from Councillor MacDonald, which is printed in your paper. Can I confirm with you that Councillor MacDonald, you still wish this motion to go forward? Okay. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Aiken, okay. Are there any amendments to the motion?
Provost, I would like to propose an amendment, if I may, which would be to delete all and insert, this council believes that in any of its operational activities, the safety of residents and workers is paramount.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lafferty. Do you have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Devlin? Okay, thank you very much. The format of the debate this evening is I will invite Councillor MacDonald to move his motion. Every councillor will be allowed to speak once in the debate, bar Councillor MacDonald, who will have his 5 minutes to sum up at the end. So you have 10 minutes, Councillor MacDonald. The seconder of your motion, Councillor Aiken, has 5 minutes. The mover of the amendment, Councillor Lafferty, has 5 minutes, as does Councillor Devlin, his seconder. And any councillors wishing to participate in the debate can speak once and have 5 minutes. At the conclusion, I will invite Councillor MacDonald, if he requires it, 5 minutes to sum up. Okay, so the floor is yours, Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Provost. In October 2017, the Cleansing and Recycling Department made a change to 4-bin collection within Netherlee. Residents were notified of this by mail shortly before the change, and at no point was any public consultation or meeting regarding the change in Netherlee ever offered to the residents by the department, a situation they now have admitted was a bad move and that lessons should be learned going forward. The change means that bin lorries will no longer enter the service lanes to collect the bins. Around that time, I asked for a meeting with the Cleansing Department and they arranged for a presentation to be made by elected members. In that presentation to Ward 4 councillors, senior department officers made reference to health and safety issues surrounding collection in the service lanes, specifically injuries that could be sustained by operatives in undertaking their work. Furthermore, obstacles such as low overhanging branches that can interfere with the vehicle and uneven road surfaces such as potholes were also discussed. I have visited all of these lanes extensively and I am mindful to mention that the surfaces of many of these lanes are in actual fact in better condition than many of the roads surrounding them. I accept, as do the residents, that there is the occasional pothole or overhanging branch, but I am also mindful to add that after discussion with residents, they are willing to have these issues immediately rectified so that the previous arrangements can continue. I would also add that at no time did the Council ever contact the residents about uneven surfaces or low-hanging branches to see if a common-sense solution could be found. A change of legislation was also mentioned at the meeting. Upon conclusion of the meeting, both myself and Councillor Miller undertook to seek the legislation that was spoken about from the Cleansing Department. They failed to provide any evidence to that effect despite repeated attempts to have the information provided. We now know that such legislation did not exist. In an email received by the Council's Chief Solicitor on the 5th of December, he confirms that there was no legislative change. He goes on to state that he concludes that any changes made to bin collection were based on the Council's own assessment of their own responsibilities in respect of the Health and Safety at Work Act. There was no change to the Act in the run-up to the change of collection arrangements, nor to my mind in all the research I have undertaken was there any change to the Act with regards to the specific refuse collection arrangements. The Cleansing Department have been asked for specific cases of injury to operatives or members of the public within the service lanes, and the Department have stated they cannot provide any evidence of any injury being sustained to either. The service lanes are perfectly designed for collection of bins in a safe manner that separates the lorries from regular street traffic. There are rarely any pedestrians in these lanes, especially in the early morning hours. The refuse vehicles are also completely separated from parked cars on the street, lessening the possibility of collisions. Many of these streets in Netherley with parked cars on both sides leave a roadway that is in most cases narrower than the lanes themselves. There is also the issue that lorries now travel on the streets and block traffic in either direction until they have completed the stretch of street. The new arrangements mean that a refuse vehicle now collects on yet another stretch of a main arterial road into Glasgow at a time of day when there is increased amounts of school and rush hour traffic. It is causing considerable congestion as a result of cars backing up behind the lorry, with vehicle drivers attempting to overtake into oncoming traffic, which increases risk of a road traffic accident. The change requires residents to take up one of two options to have their 4 bins collected. Either they must haul their heavy bins to the end of service lanes for collection, or they must permanently place their 4 bins directly outside their front doors. The streets in question are terraced main door properties with no gaps between them at any point. This means that the front of the property is locked out from the back of the property, making it impossible for people to put their bins out at the front of their property on collection days only. Furthermore, these attached terrace buildings are much longer than any terrace properties within Ward 4 and are unique in that sense. Some residents who reside in properties equidistant from either end of the service lane have walks in excess of 50 to 100 metres. Netherley is an Article 4 direction area, and as I understand from communications with Councillor Ireland, Chair of the Planning Committee, and also a Netherley resident of one of the streets affected, I am reliably informed that there is a possibility that Netherley may be considered to become a conservation area sometime before the next local development plan, which is timetabled for adoption in the latter part of 2019. Now, I know that Article 4 direction has little bearing on placement of bins, but what it does do is it sets an overall tone for future consideration for conservation status. Imagine for a moment if Netherley does become a conservation area, but at the same time properties have bins permanently placed outside the front doors. Surely this measure flies in the face of any conservation status. Furthermore, it could be added that the change forcing residents to take up the option of placing their bins in front of their doors might be to the disadvantage of the area being granted conservation status in the first place. In an email I received from Councillor Ireland in late October, she states, quote, "A conservation area designation is possibly considered the most effective way of ensuring that Netherley continues to be protected from inappropriate development and that the character and appearance of the area as a whole is preserved and enhanced," unquote. I welcome Councillor Ireland's acknowledgement of the character and appearance of the area and the need for it to be preserved and enhanced. I would hope that she would share my view, therefore, that this option given to residents is indeed not sensitive to the character and appearance of the area being preserved and enhanced. Certainly, the residents of Netherley feel very strongly that placing 4 wheelie bins permanently outside their properties would not be preserving the area and certainly would not be an enhancement. So the alternative is to force residents, many of which are in their retirement years, to partially collect their own refuse and recycling, because that in effect is what they're being forced to do. Local authorities have a responsibility to collect refuse and recycling from a reasonable distance from the property. 50 to 100 metres is not a reasonable distance. The reality is this. In the colder, darker winter months, residents will be forced to wheel their very heavy bins either up or down service lanes. These lanes are not lit like streets are lit. In sharp contrast, lorries are equipped with headlights and service lights so as to be able to light the areas around them. Since these changes were made, bins have been spread across the access way to the lanes and many are simply left abandoned on the footpaths. This impedes the ability to pass safely and many parents with young children and prams have brought the issue to my attention. The bins being left here are forcing pedestrians with young children, those with mobility issues, and most importantly wheelchair users to have to move out onto the roadway in order to get past. Furthermore, the accumulation of empty bins prohibits vehicles entering the lanes to get into their garages. As you can appreciate, bins will often sit out for days after collection. Some people will be away, some people will forget to pull them back up the lane, others regrettably have decided to leave them there and fill them while passing. Perhaps they do so as a protest to the new arrangements. Perhaps they do so as they are unwilling to move them back and forward. In either case, it is less than ideal and something that compliant residents cannot control. The empty bins are blowing over in the wind and are ending up in the roadway. Some have fallen against parked cars and can cause damage. There is an even more important matter that has left many residents worried for the safety of their area, their property and their vehicles. Many of these plastic wheelie bins have recently been stolen from the Netherley and Stamperland areas by groups of youths and have been taken to various areas to be burned. Some have been burned on site. I highlight a more serious case last summer concerning one of my constituents in Stamperland. Sadly, a group of young people at approximately 3 o'clock in the morning pulled the bins out onto the pavement from a visible street level position and proceeded to set them alight directly next to my constituents' 2 parked vehicles. 3 bins went up in flames and the fire took both cars with them. 2 total losses plus the rebuild of a bin enclosure. Certainly a senseless act and not a victimless crime by any means. To date, my constituent has total losses of approximately £3,500. I am sure that the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, who have been called out on numerous occasions recently, would be of the opinion that collections of empty bins in a visible area is a risk and inviting trouble. Residents of Netherley are naturally very worried that the accumulation of bins, which individually they have no control over, are going to become a target for fire raising and property damage. In closing, I would say that Netherley residents have been badly let down by their local authority and are collectively victims of a poorly researched and implemented decision by the cleansing department. This has caused a major disruption and hardship to these people's lives, and naturally they are angry by the decision, and they also feel that they are not being listened to and that the service being provided to them is blatantly unsatisfactory. I would ask my fellow elected members to consider my motion and to support it in order to ensure that the rights of Netherley residents are upheld. A bad decision has been made here, and we have the power to do the right thing and overturn that bad decision. That is why we are here as elected members. Local government is a functional system that has the power to oversee council decisions and to recall them if a situation requires it. We have the power to override incorrect decisions. We have the power to do that collectively, and I would ask that we all exercise that responsibility here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Could I ask Councillor Aiken to second? Remember, could you please keep it to your 5 minutes?
Thank you, Provost. Last Thursday, a public meeting was held in Netherley, which ward councillors MacDonald and Miller attended. I was there as a ward resident. Ward councillors Lafferty and Ireland were invited to attend but declined. At last Thursday's public meeting, Councillor Miller publicly declared in front of 40 or so Netherley residents that he'd sought 3 separate legal opinions, which meant that he would have to oppose this motion. One of Councillor Miller's legal opinions may have been produced by a Conservative researcher who is not a qualified lawyer. On 15th of November, Councillor Miller had emailed Councillor MacDonald saying, "I've asked one of Paul Masterson's staff to do some research as to any potential legislation." Regrettably, Councillor Miller has refused to make any of his 3 legal opinions public and has instead made reference only to some unspecified judicial review, which he says prevents bin lanes from being used to empty bins. I don't know which judicial review Councillor Miller is referring to, and neither does the Council's Chief Solicitor, Jerry Mahon. This is all the more puzzling when you consider that Councillor Miller had said only a few months ago that he was against these new arrangements. On 19th October, Councillor Miller had emailed the chair of the Netherley Residents Association saying that Councillor MacDonald has also made a representation to the Environment Department, and I'm quite sure we will work together and individually to try and get this decision taken by the SNP and Labour administration reversed. This is actually interesting because Councillor Miller is blaming the SNP and Labour councillors when actually the decision was taken by the cleansing department themselves and had nothing to do with the SNP and Labour councillors. So far, Councillor Miller has refused to share his 3 legal opinions, leaving Netherlee residents completely in the dark. If Councillor Miller is referring to the 2015 fatal accident inquiry following the Glasgow bin lorry tragedy, no reference was ever made to private bin lanes. The tragic events of that awful day took place at George Square, on public roads and footpaths that had nothing to do with private bin lanes. So why did the Council change the bin collecting arrangements? I can only conclude that the Council have unilaterally changed the arrangements. They have not been forced to do so by law, they have chosen to do so. The Council's decision then has been discretionary and not mandatory. Could it be because of accidents? Well, no. The Council have confirmed that they cannot find any records of injuries to Council employees within the lanes or due to pickups within the lanes. In fact, the only incidents which the Council have confirmed involve the clipping of some wing mirrors of the bin lorries. Could it be because of the size of modern bin lorries? Again, no. The Council have 2 different types and sizes of bin lorries, so this is not a factor. The truth of the matter is that the Council have changed the arrangement because it suits Council employees, not because it suits the residents. Many Netherlee residents are elderly or are just lacking the physical strength to drag and heave heavy bins up to 50 metres along a dark, unlit lane. Rather than asking bin lorries to negotiate a narrow road, the Council would prefer elderly residents to do the heavy work themselves. Councillors, it's time to put the needs of residents ahead of the personal preferences of Council management. Before we move to the vote, I would urge all councillors to ask yourselves, why did I get into local politics? Was it to cosy up to your political parties or cosy up to council managers? Or was it to defend, or was it to defend the interests of the residents? The Netherlee residents wish the previous bin arrangements to be reinstated, and I would urge all councillors to give this matter the most serious consideration and then to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you for your amendment. Councillor Aiken. Can I ask Councillor Lafferty for the amendment, please? Thank you.
Yes, certainly, Provost. Can I just say I always find it reprehensible and unedifying if we have a debate, some members seem to reduce it to our personal attacks on other members rather than addressing the matter in front of us. Can I say this is not a new matter? I'm well aware as a councillor, as any councillor here, we want to keep our residents and voters happy. We want to avoid difficult decisions, but sometimes we have to make difficult decisions, and it's failing in our duty if we back away from them. This isn't a new matter. In fact, the first paper on the question of access to lanes came before Cabinet in December 2007, and then Councillor Montague, representing the area, highlighted her concerns that brought to her by constituents about bins at the front, bins blocking the area. But the main issue with the lanes is the clearance and visibility. We have found that it's impossible, or we've had reports from officers that it's impossible to access the lanes without the external mirrors being turned in. And unfortunately, if they're travelling down, the public must keep quiet and allow elected members to be heard. Well, that's something for 4 years' time, but we'll be dealing with it now.
Please be quiet in the gallery, because the people who speak are not clear the gallery. You have to listen.
The review of the lanes throughout East Renfrewshire was the result of a fatal accident in June 2006, when an elderly resident was struck down and died of their injuries caused by a bin lorry reversing. This occurred in Giffnock. And from that time, the Director of Environment carried out a review of all lanes and has been gradually rolling out this programme of replacing wheelie bins and taking access away from the access lanes at the back. These are lanes that were built primarily to serve housing built before World War I. They're not designed to accommodate lorries. They're designed to accommodate horses and carts delivering coal and taking away refuse. the clearance problem remains. As I said, lorries can't proceed down the lane without turning in their mirrors. And then if they unfortunately meet a contractor's van parked on the street or some other obstruction, then they have to reverse practically blind. The guy at the back who's trying to guide as well, he's as much use as a chocolate fire guard because he can't see the driver. The driver can't see him. It is an unacceptable situation. Following a widespread risk assessment of working practices within the refuse collection, lanes have been identified and they've been rolled out across Giffnock, Clarkson, Stamplin and parts of Netherlee, and the public have generally accepted the situation. What concerns us is safety of the public, our residents, but also the lives of our workers who are of no less value. We must take any steps necessary to protect them. I attended the meeting in November with the 4 other elected members, and we took up the question with the cleansing and waste recycling managers, but also had representations from frontline workers who answered any concerns raised by residents. Following that meeting, I understood that all the members who attended had accepted the explanation provided by our officers. Well, there was no indication of that at the time. The Council has a duty of care to the public as well as our workforce. This has been identified a clear danger of a resident or a child stepping out of a back gate into the lane in the path of a vehicle with severely restricted visibility. We often hear the statement made to us about accidents waiting to happen. Sadly, this is not a case of an accident waiting to happen. And as I referred to before, an incident occurred where a vehicle reversing, and I understand it has been the cause of a number of fatalities across the UK. The motion before us is to reverse the decision to remove vehicles from these lanes and revert to the previous working method. Effectively, this would be asking we as councillors to overrule a decision which has been taken by managers on health and safety grounds and supported by the Corporate Health and Safety Unit and the trade unions. A failure to implement these changes could lead to a contravention of health and safety guidelines, including a directive following the incident in 2006, the fatal accident inquiry at that time. Failure to implement these changes would lead to a contravention which would leave the Council open to prosecution if a dangerous incident were to occur. At Council meetings there are occasionally issues that divide us in policy and politics, but I believe that the vast majority of us, at least, believe that the safety of residents and workers is paramount, and to fly in the face of Council officers, their guidance and the directives from the Health and Safety Executive on a health and safety matter would be grossly irresponsible.
Thank you very much for your amendment, Councillor Lafferty. Seconded by, I think, Councillor Devlin. Do you wish to speak? Councillor Ireland.
Yes, Provost, I've got some information I wanted to pass out that would add a bit more depth to my statement, and with your permission, would that be okay to hand those out to members here today?
Yes, there's no bar in that.
Is that okay? Thank you very much.
Yes, there's no bar in circulating information.
It's just I only have 5 minutes, so it's handy. Thank you. Aye, this is.
Councillor Swift, good.
would it be possible to have a 5-minute recess to read this? Because, if this is pertinent to the debate and it's being introduced just now, it would not be unreasonable for us to read the material in front of us. Would that be reasonable?
I haven't seen it, and I don't know how long it will take to speed read it.
I'm absolutely fine for Councillor, because I realise that has just been tabled just now. It was more just to add a wee bit of depth to what I was going to say and give a wee bit of background from the actual health and safety.
Okay, thank you. I'll take advice. Councillor MacDonald, do you wish
I would also add my weight to Councillor Swift's suggestion there. I think it is a prudent thing to take place that we have a recess, but I would like to point out that in my final 5-minute statement that I'm going to give, I call that each one of the political groups that sit within this chamber would be afforded the opportunity to take a recess and to have discussions within their own groups before the vote take place. So it may be the kind of thing where you want to allow that to happen later on in the agenda item.
Well, I don't think that's for yourself to determine what happens in other political groups, with due respect.
No, I wasn't saying it was a suggestion. It was a suggestion for an adjournment. That's all it was.
I'm sure the councillors have heard you speak. If they wish a recess, I'm sure they would ask for one. But I will allow the 5 minutes for individuals. Please don't interrupt me. I will allow the 5 minutes for councillors to read the information. So we'll start the recess now and return. Councillor Ireland will have her 5 minutes.